We are Maria
and Nicole. We're two secular homeschooling moms that have
been there, done that. Welcome to episode 24. Today we're going to be talking about favorite books for new readers. This is a special episode for elementary age children that are new to reading. We're going to be discussing beginner chapter books and talk about great read-alouds that will really ignite their love for reading. We're going to be talking about all that and more.
And as usual, we want to stress that our podcast is an inclusive space for your everyday parents that are looking for education options. We are not here to convince you to homeschool. We want to stress that you need to do what works for your child and for your family.
Every family's different.
Absolutely. And you know your children best. So feel free to take what advice or information you get from here that works for you and chuck the rest.
Hi, Nicole.
Hey, long time no see.
I know, we've been busy. Spring break. You were doing all your Irish dancing, and we were off having all the fun.
I know. What you been doing?
Well, we went to see my parents and my brother, and we explored a bunch of new coffee shops in the area. We love to go and take a book and just go read.
Oh, yeah. I saw your Be Real the other day, and I was trying to figure out where you were.
Yeah. I just took pictures of random people on the other side of me. They're like, is that your daughter?
I know. I was like, who is this? I'm like, who are you out with?
Oh, God.
Like, I know your schedule a little bit, and I was like, I just can't figure out. Do you have all new friends?
Well, we also went, we have the huge half-price bookstore here in Dallas, and my son wanted to go there. They have a coffee shop in there. One of the books that I have on his high school list is Catcher in the Rye, and it just so happens he walks up to me and goes, Mom, can I get this book? And it was Catcher in the Rye. And I'm like,
oh, wow.
Oh, gosh. Okay, I guess so.
Did he know it was on your list?
No, he has no idea.
Oh,
Don't
my God,
tell him.
that's so funny.
And he doesn't listen to the podcast, so he won't know.
Oh, my gosh. Well, what a great lead-in for our episode today, then.
We have a lot of great book suggestions today and ways to get your kids really excited about books when they start to read.
Yeah. So in episode 15, we covered how to teach your child to read, how to know when they're ready. We talked about curricula, and we talked about different games and such for reading. So if you haven't listened, you might want to revisit that episode. As usual, we pop those into the show notes so that you can find them really easily.
Right. As we said in that episode, reading is fundamental and it's necessary for learning, and instilling a love of reading at an early age is the key that can unlock the door to lifelong learning. It's the foundation that helps us learn and make sense of the world around us.
Yeah, reading builds social and emotional skills, and it ignites our imaginations. Reading builds self-confidence and independence, and it's a critical foundation for developing logic and problem-solving skills.
Right, and once you're past that very initial part of beginning to read, maybe you've completed a program or a certain level, you may wonder where to go next, and it can be confusing to see all kinds of options and different terms and technological jargon out there describing various stages of reading.
As I was researching for the first part of this episode, I kept stumbling on all these websites that used terms like emergent and early and transitional and fluent when referring to groups of reading levels. And these might indicate where students might have different reading abilities or writing skills or sight word proficiency. And there were just all these different categories. Like, one had all these alphabetical levelings, and to be totally honest, it was confusing and probably meant for the more technical teaching side of a large classroom setting.
Right. I see that on message boards sometimes when people come on and they ask specific questions about what grade level this or leveled reader that, and we didn't really do that. But clearly this is something they know from teaching or from the school, because that's how they categorize everything.
Yeah. I mean, every time somebody mentions the word rubric, I'm like, are you a teacher? You have to be a teacher, right?
I think my kids were probably, 10 or 11 before. I was like, what is rubric? I didn't even know what that.
I know. There's a lot of times when I'll ask, I'll be like, what do you mean by that?
I got a kid all the way through school, and in college, I'm like, what is rubric? So yeah, there are a range of terms to describe readers in different stages of their literacy journeys. So let's briefly talk about developing readers, early readers, emerging readers, and transitional readers.
And yeah, really, when we talk about developing and emergent readers, we're actually kind of talking about the same thing. Technically, anyone who reads could be considered a developing reader. Like, we're all still strengthening our comprehension and writing skills, like, even now, like, into adulthood. But so when we say this in relation to children, though, these are kiddos who are learning, like, the basics of reading, such as decoding and phonics and the alphabet and sight words that are essential for long-term literacy.
Right. They may be making the transition to longer books with more complicated plot lines, and they're just overall evolving into a more skilled and confident reader. They probably recognize high-frequency words, both in books and just things that you see in daily life while they're driving, in the kitchen, around the house, on TV. Usually they show a strong desire to read and also to listen to others read.
Sometimes we use the term emergent to emphasize these kids that are developing the foundational skills that will support lifelong literacy, and they're just truly emerging into that new territory of reading potential.
Right. When we talk about transitional readers, well, first, transitional is that stage right before moving on to chapter books, and it's totally okay to let your child decide when this is. I still love a great picture book, but I also had a kid one day that decided that picture books were way too babyish, and she wanted to move on to chapter books, and they never looked back.
Yeah, and also when we hear the terms early or easy readers, this is often actually referring to the books, not the child. They're books with age-appropriate vocabulary and word usage. They might have simple sentence construction. They can be utilitarian sometimes, but they should also be like rich and vibrant and keep the kids' interest and keep your child motivated and able to decode words that are unfamiliar.
Right. Remember how exciting reading was for you? And you may rediscover your zest for reading alongside your child. It can be really refreshing for both of you. Because language used to describe reading development can be complicated, we just encourage you to meet your reader just right where they are.
So just a reminder that this is a weekly episode. We drop one every Thursday morning just for you. And if you have any additional ideas or comments, please come and comment on our Facebook page, on the episode thread, or send us an email at info@btdthomeschool.com. We'd really love to hear from you.
So when our child first learns to read and they've begun their own unique reading journey, you may ask, what kind of books should we be looking for? What books are going to continue to ignite their interest and encourage them to build upon those skills?
So here's where you may start looking for these early readers, or sometimes they're called first step readers. Sometimes it's helpful to actually just go to the library and see how they organize different level books. But remember that you don't have to stick to one kind or a level. Some kids do like to do that or like to track their progress that way. Like one of my kids liked certain books in a certain section, and she wanted to read all of those. And then she decided then she was going to move on to the next shelf and then read all of those.
Well, and another good point that kind of makes me think about is, reading isn't always completely in one swoop motion. Sometimes children like to challenge themselves, but then other times they like to read something that they've been reading for a year and go back to it.
Sure.
So you have to be really flexible and you don't want to always challenge your child all the time and make things hard. You want them to actually read things, and that goes for math too, by the way. I learned that the hard way. So some kids may jump right into the full-on chapter books. My daughter, at a very young age, insisted on reading Red Badge of Courage. She was 4, and it stressed me out, but that's okay too,
right?
As long as it's appropriate, and a lot of times you can pre-read this stuff. One of the things we think about as a Charlotte Mason homeschooler is avoiding twaddle. And twaddle is defined as books with lots of pictures and action, but with short snippets of sentences and little character. They can sometimes talk down to children or require little effort. It doesn't help to strengthen a child's imagination, is what they say about twaddle.
Right. And like an example that I like to use is the Winnie the Pooh books. Like the original books by A.A. Milne, they're just beautiful and deep stories. They're full of adventure. They're super funny, full of humor, lovely language. And I mean, they're more than just funny. Like, in fact, I often say to read these aloud to your young kids, but also hand them off to your older kids. Because there's so many silly ways, like silly things in the ways that animals like misspell words and use puns, that you almost have to see it, like, rather than just hear it being read to you.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, the Disney-fied Winnie the Pooh, that like the show and then the picture books that go with it, they're totally different. Like none of that, they're animated. They're just kind of dumbed down. There aren't any of the puns. Some of those deep jokes are like just totally gone. They're just surface level funnies, and they're more like just storylines. And some of the very best things in the story aren't even in the books or the show.
Also, considering that reading preference can come in many flavors, and reluctant readers may require other currency, like maybe graphic novels. For instance, Calvin and Hobbes was a favorite for my son, and I don't know if we would have really broken into those chapter books without the transition of Calvin and Hobbes.
Oh,
so
sure.
funny.
Yeah, a lot of people kind of down on graphic novels, but, whatever it takes to get a kid to read, like, sometimes that is what's going to propel them into that. So, favorite early picture books and readers. Like I said, we love picture books still. Some of the old, they kind of start out as baby board books, but Sandra Boynton, we loved those books. She always has a lot of funny rhymes and such. Jan Brett, she's a favorite author. She has just beautifully, beautifully illustrated books.
Right, and Dr. Seuss, we love all the funny rhymes and the play on words. It's always like The Things You Can Think was always our favorite. Urza Jack Keats has so beautiful books.
The Snowy Day,
Yes.
I love, that's one of my favorites. And I always like that his books are, I say his. Is it a she? Is it a he? I don't know.
I always thought it was a female, but I don't know. We're going to have to find out.
I know, we might have to read a biography. But, the books are set in, like, downtown New York and stuff. And they're just they're really cute.
They're super cute. Oh, P.D. Eastman. All the P.D. Eastman books. Go, Dog, Go. Oh, my gosh. Fred and Ted.
Oh, yeah, Big Dog, Little Dog. Love them.
Fred and Ted Go Camping. Oh, my gosh. That was our favorite. We read it over and over and over again. So those were really fun. The Richard Scarry books, the one that's called What Do People Do All Day? I think my kids still think that if you put too much yeast in something that it's going to blow up a house. Like, it's going to get so big.
I see a bunch of memes about that this is how people got set up with, like, unrealistic expectations of what working was going to be like.
Oh, gosh, yes. What Do People Do All Day? Oh, we love that book so much.
Remember Corduroy by Don Freeman?
That was so fun. Do you know that mattresses don't even really have buttons anymore? At one point, Cameron asked me, why doesn't our mattress have a button? And I never really realized. But growing up, we had buttons on our mattresses.
Oh, that's funny. Sure.
Corduroy needed that for it. And you know what? We made that into a little preschool unit where Cameron would sew a button out of felt and made little straps. So that's fun. You can always take these stories and put them into whatever you want in your homeschool.
Exactly. Roxaboxen is one of my favorite books of all time. It's by Alice McLaren. And it's a story about these kids that create this little, like, outback of their neighborhood. They kind of live in the desert, and all they have is, like, boxes and rocks. And they make this little town, like, outlines of their houses, and they sell things and currency. And it's all about, like, the different ways that they do it through the years. And then they all come back in the end of the book to, like, see Roxaboxen, and, like, they see that it's still the little kids now are, like, living that life. And it just reminds me of all our park days when we would set up stores and things like that. It's a very homeschooly book to me.
I love the imagination that ignites. I love it.
Yep. I also really like Kevin Henkes books, like Lily's Purple Plastic Purse.
Oh, yes.
Did you ever read that one?
Yes.
She was so funny. She had a purse full of treasures, and she loves her teacher, and then she, like, keeps interrupting his lessons, and so he takes the purse away from her, and she gets, like, super mad, and she attempts revenge. I think she draws, like, an ugly picture of him or something. It was funny, but he's got a bunch of books. Chrysanthemum is another one that he had.
Yeah, we like that one a lot. The Frog and Toad books by Arnold Lobel. These are adorable stories, and they're written in an easy to follow style with two great characters, Frog and Toad, and all their adventures that they have. I love those. We love those Frog and Toad books. Oh, and the Little Bear books by Elsa, and I don't know how to say it. It's Minarik, I think, is the last name, where those are one of our favorite starter books, and they're absolutely charming and filled with a lot of early starter words, and they repeat over and over, so really solidifies those words for the child. Yeah,
I like those a lot. We love Cynthia Rylant, Henry and Mudge books.
Oh, I loved Henry and Mudge.
They're so sweet. It's a boy and his dog, and the dog is big and slobbery, and they're just...
yes.
They're very short little, I mean, they technically have chapters, but they're, like 5 lines kind of things. And then there's a spin-off series, too, that's Annie and Snowball, and that's his cousin.
Annie and Snowball, too.
And her, I think Snowball's a cat, and they live next door. They're super cute. Zoe and Sassafras these are newer. My older kids did not read these, but my younger one did. And they're super cute little chapter books. They have a lot of science in them. They're really, a lot of people use that in addition to their science curriculum. It's a girl and her cat. There's always some magical creatures. They've got a problem that needs to be solved.
Right. And speaking of cats, Mr. Putty and Tabby. That was a super cute storybook.
Love Mr. Putter. He's so cool.
Mo Williams, Elephant and Piggy. Oh my gosh, if you have not explored Elephant and Piggy, you have to. We adored them. They were such great books. The illustrations are super expressive, and it kind of helps the reader to decipher new and challenging words. It really blows them up, and so those are super fun for kids to recognize new words.
Yeah. We like Fran Manushkin's Katie Wu and Pedro series. They're about different friends. There's Katie Wu series and a Pedro series. But they just have some adventures and all kinds of fun stuff. They're really great. A total classic book, Where the Wild Things Are. Jack, my son, read that book over and over and over again. We have the puppets still for all of those. And funny story was, we talked, I think, on another episode about how our kids picked really bizarre birthday party themes. Yeah. Like when they were kids that weren't they weren't the mainstream birthday party things that you could go to Party City and find
Mount
the
Vesuvius covers ancient
right.
city of Pompeii 4-year-old birthday party. That really happened.
Jack decided he really wanted to have a Where the Wild Things party, and this was before the movie came out. There was a movie later on, so I went to Google, and that's all adult S&M parties.
No.
Oh yeah, I went down the way wrong rabbit hole of what
furries.
that. So all I wanted was napkins. Napkins and matching plates.
Oh my gosh. Alexander and the No Good Very Bad Day by Judith Vorst. That is a great book to teach children that not every day has to be a happy day, and it's okay to have bad days.
Yeah, total classic.
I love that. Shel Silverstein. Oh my gosh. Shel Silverstein has a special place in my heart. I remember one Christmas morning, my daughter got the brand new Shel Silverstein, and it was the hit. She wouldn't even open any of her other Christmas presents.
Oh my gosh, she had to stop and read it all.
Oh my gosh. If you have not explored Shel, that's so funny. The poems are super funny and crazy and quirky, and it's just a childhood favorite for sure.
I mean, they stay with you forever. I probably could go ahead and quote 5 of them right now off the top of my head. So, while looking at lists to make sure we didn't leave things off, but by the way, we did actually leave a lot off because there's only so much episode time, and there's a million books out there. We could go on and on with this forever. But
so we created our top 50 books for new readers. We have enjoyed all of these books in our own homes with our own children. They have been beloved favorites throughout the years, and we really wanted to share all of them with you. This collection of early reader books, it has colorful illustrations, and they have shorter lengths and clear formatting, and they've been picked with the readers in mind that are going to be bridging the gap between reading board books and really into jumping into lengthier chapter books. And one thing that I really love about this list is that we really combined a mix of beloved classics with some newer titles. And I think we did a pretty good job of incorporating diverse voices and characters and things that we enjoyed in our own homeschool. And I think that, representation really does matter. And we really want kids to see themselves in the stories that they read. So I think that we did a great job on combining that. So make sure you check that out on our show notes. We will have the entire list, and we actually wrote a very detailed description for each book, so make sure you check that out.
So we'll add that to the show notes, but you can always find, lots of great lists online. I collected them for a while. I had a whole binder full of book lists.
Oh, wow.
It was kind of a crazy thing.
And we both mentioned many times on this podcast and that we both love to read to our kids. You still do, even though she's in high school.
Yeah.
But as younger kids, this was definitely an every single day occurrence, several times a day, most days. Mm-hmm. And when we weren't reading, we were often listening to audiobooks while we were driving.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some favorite read-alouds or early chapter books that our kids can enjoy as a family.
So we talked about the Magic Treehouse books before.
Oh,
We've
yes.
mentioned these. We both really liked them. I even did a homeschool co-op book club class with all of my kids at different times.
I
We've done a
co-taught that
couple.
with you.
Yeah, it was a fun little class. I mean, the books are sometimes predictable. They're definitely formulaic, but it does add to the charm.
Right. The siblings, Jack and Annie, they go on lots of adventures. They introduce readers to a variety of real historical events and figures. They are a great stepping stone into deep dives on topics, and they even have accompanying reference guides if your kids want more after the story. They are about 80 pages long, and you can easily read them in a sitting or at least in a day or so. And I would say that the Magic Treehouse series was probably the absolute most favorite in our home. The Ancient Pompeii one even inspired our 4-year-old birthday party. They even ignited some unit studies that I created because my kids wanted to continue to learn beyond the book. I remember there was a moon-based one that was not technically a historical one because it's like, okay, that's a future one.
Right.
But,
yeah. Some of them are kind of delve into well, and then the series after Magic Treehouse too, the Merlin,
right? The Merlin series.
Merlin Adventure. I forget what they're called, but yeah, Mary Pope Osborne is the author. But they're great.
Yeah.
Do you remember when we did teach that co-op class that one time we had a kid? We had been we're several weeks into the course. And the kid goes, "Is this a movie? Because I haven't seen it." We're like, "It's a book club class. We read the book every week."
I guess they weren't listening.
It was really funny.
Oh, gosh.
Another author is Beverly Cleary, and we loved her Ramona books.
Yeah.
These were my absolute favorite as a kid, and I just could not wait to introduce my kids to Ramona. We went through all 8 of the Ramona books, and then the spinoff Henry Huggins, who's her sister's best friend.
Huggins books.
Yep. She also has a series about a mouse, Ralph S. Mouse, and the Mouse and the Motorcycle. We read those for a book club.
That was my favorite book growing up.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
oh, I
it really
love
was.
it. I love it. The mouse befriends a boy on vacation. We did so many mouse stories in our little girls book club at one point that we were like, no more animal stories, please. It seems like there's a lot of mouse main characters out there.
Speaking of mice, we love Geronimo Stilton and his Gazette. He was a newspaper reporter, and they're really funny, and they have impactful illustrations, and it highlights new words, kind of like Elephant and Piggy, but on a chapter book series.
Yeah.
So those are good to just cuddle on the couch, and if your child's not at that level, you're reading, and then those words just pop out. So
Yeah.
I like that. Winnie the Pooh, also big favorites that we talked about earlier. There are 4 books in the series, but really 2 of them are Winnie the Pooh focused, and the others are poetry and story collections. The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth
Love
Graham.
that.
Another in the same vein as Winnie the Pooh. Animal stories that are full of adventure, and they're just super funny.
Oh my gosh, they're so funny. My kids didn't really like books that had characters with a lot of sibling rivalry.
Mine didn't either.
Yeah, it's not that we didn't have sibling rivalry in our house, but there are books where that's the hallmark of the sibling relationship, and we didn't really like that because we couldn't always relate to kids that talked to each other like that. I don't know, it was just not our style.
I had a really sensitive child that if there was a stressful moment, they couldn't handle it. It was too much. Kind of a little more sensitive emotionally. So
right.
Yeah, we avoided those.
And some of our homeschool kids also they don't like the books that have constant school settings. As homeschoolers, they don't always relate to books that are really hyper focused around a school day. So one way we found our way around those was to kind of search out older books. I don't know if I've mentioned before, but my grandmother was a children's librarian. So she always was bringing us books, and they were always not the mainstream books that everybody else was reading. In fact, she would kind of grab the books that I did have and wanted to read them. And I remember there was I was reading Judy Blume, and she saw I had the series, and so the one that she picks is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Oh gosh.
Which I'm like, oh gosh, of all the Judy Blume books, that is kind of the awkward one for your grandma to read. But anyway, one of the authors she introduced me to was Elizabeth Enright. Again, one of my absolute favorites. I don't think I've ever read a bad Elizabeth Enright book, but my favorite is Gone Away Lake, and the sequel, Return to Gone Away. They're about cousins who, find this like hidden resort town. It is just really neat. There's also the Melendi family series is also by Elizabeth and Wright, and it starts with the book The Saturdays. And these are books about siblings or cousins and their adventures. Sometimes they're set in summer, so there's not a lot of school like going on in those books.
Right. And speaking of some of these older classics, one book that is an oldie but absolutely a goodie is Tom Swift. And he's an inventor, and he's a child inventor, and he invents all these wonderful contraptions. And my kids are definitely STEM kind of kids, and so they loved the Tom Swift books. So that is definitely recommended for anybody who really enjoys inventing and creating things. Oh, and The Boxcar Children, speaking of siblings, by Gertrude Warner. These books are a sweet series of, I think there's about 160 titles.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, and it's written by a first grade teacher about 4 orphan children that create a home in an abandoned boxcar and encounter so many adventures and mysteries along the way. They're super friendly. Like, the siblings are best friends. They take really good care of each other.
They really do.
There's other adaptations of these, including A Virgin for younger kids. My son actually used, he got the series for Christmas one year. He, like all of them.
Yeah.
So I bought them on eBay.
So sometimes adaptations are good. Like, I would suggest maybe reading an adaptation of Shakespeare when you need some better understanding of the story before you actually read the original. But, definitely do read both so you don't miss out on the language. But start with the adaptation so you don't get caught up like trying to figure out what's going on, especially with Shakespeare, because his books can get really confusing.
Right, the language is tough.
Yeah, and sometimes I think you lose the beauty of the language when you read an adaptation. You take some risk that they're going to really dumb down the story, and there's that twaddle we're trying to avoid. One I think of in particular is Peter Pan, which I know some people don't like that book anymore anyway, but Peter Pan, everybody knows the story from Disney and from other stuff, but the actual writing of the book is so gorgeous, and the language and I remember reading it to my kids, and like at some point they were like, I don't know what's going on all the time in this book, but I really like it.
Yeah, because, it is dumbed down for Disney, and, they make it so that they don't think that these kids can understand some of it. And maybe some of it's hard, but it's challenging them too, and enhancing their vocabulary.
Oh, totally. It really enhances vocabulary. That's one of the best things, is reading books that are kind of above your level or that really challenge you. I have a friend who doesn't like her kids to read books with a character who is older than her kids were at the time. Which is interesting. I don't know how I feel about that, but I definitely do like to encourage kids to read books that are a challenge. It was funny when we were reading Robin Hood. I was talking about that with our friend Jen the other day. And like when our kids both read that book, they would all be like, hey, let's go to the playground and I'm going to bring my cudgel. And they'd be like, don't talk to me like that. I'll crack your crown. Like, it was all stuff that they had pulled out of those stories.
Well, and I think sometimes I can see where your friend is saying that, because sometimes, like if I have an 11-year-old and the story is surrounded by a 15 or 16-year-old, there's going to be a lot of a host of issues, in some of those younger adult books. So maybe that's what she was getting at. But
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's something to think about. Yeah. So back to books, like another series that I like, actually, I've only read the first one in this series, so I think I recommend the whole series, but Swallows and Amazons. It's by Arthur Ransom.
We read them. Highly recommend them.
Gosh, they're great. It's another older book about, I can't remember now if they were siblings or cousins, but they spend the summer camping out on an island that's like across from their summer house. And they have all these adventures, and my kids loved that idea of being able to like live wild like they did, where the parents and neighbors knew where the kids were the whole time. Like, they were really safe on this island, but those were really great books.
And the modern day version of these kind of stories would probably be maybe the Penderwicks.
Oh, yeah.
It's another sweet family that has their moments of rivalry and kind of jerkiness, but all otherwise loving and supportive of each other.
Yeah, we really related to those. I think there's 3 of those books.
Right. And Where the Mountain Meets the Moon by Grace Lin. This is a fantasy adventure novel that's inspired by Chinese folklore. And this particular book is about a girl from a poor village seeking good fortune for her people. And there's a sequel, but I haven't read it. It's such a beautiful story, though. And Very, Very Far North by Dan Barrell. It's a series, and it's kind of like Winnie the Pooh-ish, and it's about an inquisitive bear who befriends an array of animals. And this is also just a great series.
Yeah, it's a newer one. We really like that one. Another couple older series, The Borrowers. There's 4 books there.
Tiny little people.
Oh yeah, I loved them. People that like live in the walls of your house, and and then like when we were young, there was a TV show called The Littles that was kind of like The Borrowers. It wasn't.
That.
Yeah, I loved The
Forgot
Littles,
about that.
but I remember and not everybody read The Borrowers. That was another one of my grandma's like finds, and I was like, oh, these are kind of like The Littles. If you like that, you'll like this. I also really like the Half Magic series by Edgar Eger.
Oh, Grania, our friend, had recommended those, and I'm so glad she did. We actually did those in an audiobook in the car.
Oh my gosh, they're fantastic. Yeah. They are really, really good books.
Oh, and there's also Kate DiCamillo, and her writing is just absolutely fantastic. People seem mixed on her sometimes.
Yeah.
Some of her stories can be dark or dreary, but she always comes through with a happy ending, and it's often a bit of a tearjerker. So there's that, so just beware. The Tale of Despero, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. Oh my gosh, I love that. Oh, and the one and the only Ivan. That was one of our favorite read-alouds.
I know, you got to be careful reading her books like out loud at lunch at a busy restaurant. Don't ask me how I know. Yeah, that can be a little embarrassing. Like One and Only Ivan came out as a movie a couple years ago, and so I asked my daughter if she wanted to go see it, and she was like, not with you. Oh. She's like, I still remember how you cried in the restaurant about that book.
I think I actually talked to you that day. You're like, I'm crying. Yeah, and you know what? Both of my kids, I love to watch the movie adaptation of a book after I read it. It's actually one of my favorite things as adult books. But my kids both refuse to. Both of them are like, hey, I read that and I have this vision, and if I watch the movie, it's going to ruin that for me, and so they won't do it.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting. I also like to see the movies afterwards, but they're never as good as the books, are they?
No, they never. My kids have seen a few, and they were always disappointed, and they're like, it ruined the book for me.
I mean, it's hard to take. Like, sometimes you have a picture in your head of what the characters look like, or, how different scenes played out, and then it doesn't quite get captured. And it's also, like, hard. Like, some of our favorite books would be, like, a 20-hour movie.
Right.
You can't really, put everything in.
So, yeah, we could go on and on all day about all our favorite books. There's so many.
There really are. Like, one of my kids likes to read books over and over and over again, and I'm like, stop. Like, there's so many out there. We're never going to be able to read them all in our lifetime. Like, I'm like a one and done. I have to read it, which there's nothing wrong with reading a favorite book over and over again. Like, totally do that. But
well, and it helps a child learn, especially at this stage. So.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, sometimes it is good to come back to them. I've really, as you heard me say in this list, like, there are so many books that I loved as a child that I really loved reading a second time with my kids. Like, you kind of forget some of the magic and the nostalgia.
Well, I hope some of the suggestions that we gave you today is going to help your brand new reader really ignite them into a full-blown chapter book reader.
Yeah, and if you have any ideas of favorite books that maybe we didn't mention, post them on our Facebook thread about this episode. I always love adding things to my book list, my nerdy book list, if you want to do a binder like I do. Even though my daughter's in high school, I'll get to those as well.
All right. We'll be adding some that we didn't mention in the episode to our show notes, so make sure you visit there, because there's just no way we can cover everything.
No.
There's some favorites out there. So, okay, next week, what do we have, Nicole?
For sure. So tune in next week for episode 25, How Do You Successfully Teach Math? We are going to be talking about how to deal with math mistakes, talk about what if my child is anxious when teaching math, and do homeschoolers need to give math tests? It's going to be an episode about those dreaded math tears.
It's going to be fun. We're going to help you through it.
We are. It'll be great. See you soon.
See you next time.
Cheers!
Be sure to check us out on our website at btdthomeschool.com, as in been there, done that, btdthomeschool.com. You can join our mailing list and get news and updates on future podcasts, and be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at the BTDT Been There Done That Homeschool Podcast.